Here's a number for you. 69,700. That's the figure that got broadcast nationally on the BBC as the number of hairdressing employees left in this industry. 1 in 5 gone, they said. A crisis. Here's another number. 161,261. That's the number of employees in the exact same industry for the exact same time period sitting in an Office for National Statistics data set that anyone can download for free. Same industry, same classification code, a gap of over 90,000 people. One of those numbers is wrong, and today I'm going to show you my working using nothing but government data and the industry's own published report and let you decide which one that is. Excuse me. Last time on the show, I told you neither of the two big stories about this industry survives contact with evidence. Not the collapse narrative and not the nothing to see here, it's just a lobbying campaign reaction to either. I showed you the real structural pressure this sector is actually under, a wage floor that's risen twice as fast as prices for 15 years running. Today's a different kind of episode. Today I want to show you exactly how far some of this campaign's own numbers stretch past what the data can actually support. And once you've seen the mechanism, exactly who benefits from stretching them that far. So, if you've heard that hairdressing is in free fall, apprenticeships gone by 2027, tens of thousands of jobs vanishing, a 2.4 billion black hole in VAT receipts, it almost certainly traces back to one document, a report called Securing the Future of UK Hairdressing and Beauty, published in February 2025, commissioned by the British Hair Consortium and produced by CBI Economics, the economic consultancy arm of the CBI. That's a serious sounding pedigree. CBI Economics, Confederation of British Industry. It's not some anonymous blog post. It's dressed up as the authoritative economic analysis. And it's been cited in broadcast media and put in front of Parliament. So I did what I think everyone citing this report should have done first. I went and read the footnotes. The report's central claim that employment in this sector is collapsing, that the Treasury is losing billions, rests heavily on one data set. It's called AH1452, and it covers, and I want you to listen carefully to this part, VAT-registered enterprises only. Not the industry, not all salons, just the roughly 12,500 at that point in time, it's now 15,000 odds, that are VAT registered out of what's estimated to be around 48,000 salons in the UK. It's now just over 50,000. Now here's where it gets interesting. The same report, CBI report, or CBIE, spends an entire section, pages 17 and 18, if you want to check it yourself, explaining that businesses are increasingly staying under the VAT threshold on purpose, deliberately splitting up, avoiding registration. They call it bunching and disaggregation, and they present it as a growing problem, and I'm not saying it's not. So think about what that means. If you know businesses are fleeing VAT registration, and then you build your entire employment collapse narrative on a data set that only counts VAT registered businesses, you built a measuring instrument that is guaranteed to show decline because you've defined the group you're measuring to shrink by design. It's like claiming that a stadium's emptying out, when actually what's happening is people are moving from the seats you're counting into the seats that you're not. And it's not a small effect. There's a second ONS data set, same industry code, same government register, same source, that includes VAT and pay-as-you-earn registered businesses together. That's the one showing 161,261 employees, not 69,700, not even the report's own headline, the CBIE report, of 86,800, more than double what's claimed in that report. And I checked, both these tables come from the exact same underlying source, the Interdepartmental Business Register, built from HMRC, VAT and PAYE data, plus Companies House records. Same register, same government pipeline, the only difference is which slice of business gets counted. CBI Economics used a narrower slice, and they didn't mention that the wider one exists. So now let's go back to that BBC figure, 69,700. Where did it actually come from? I asked repeatedly in writing over the best part of a year. Excuse me. And eventually BBC South East confirmed something important. They didn't produce that analysis themselves. It came from, in their words, figures and modelling presented by the British Hair Consortium, described as part of a wider industry analysis referenced by the CBI Economics report. They also told me, and I'll quote you this directly, that it should have been explained more clearly and in proper context. So I asked for the underlying data, and eventually they gave it to me. It's a household survey, the annual population survey, broken into overlapping 12-month windows. And here's the number that should have stopped this claim in its tracks before it ever went to air. That 69,700 figure carries a margin of error of plus or minus 27,800. So just say that back to yourself. 27,800. So that means that the real figure could be anywhere from 42,000 to nearly 100,000. You cannot responsibly claim a crash, a crisis, a 1 in 5 collapse from a number with margin of error that wide. Statistically, that number is consistent with almost no change at all. And if you cherry pick which overlapping 12-month window you compare, the same data set gives you 6 completely different employee figures, from 67,100 up to 101,800, all supposedly describing the same industry in roughly the same period. That's not one crisis number, that's 6 different numbers, none of them reliable enough to build a national broadcast segment on, let alone a parliamentary case for tax reform. Here's the part that I find genuinely remarkable though, and I didn't do this analysis quietly on my own, I put it in writing to the person who wrote the report. On the 29th of July 2025, I sent CBI Economics 5 specific, entirely answerable questions. Where does the 2.4 billion VAT figure actually come from? What's the 14.4 billion productivity projection based on? How representative is a 542-person survey of a 48,000 business salon industry? How was the hidden economy estimated? And how is the proposed VAT reform to be funded? I got the offer of a phone call. I asked politely for it in writing instead, because by that point the report has been cited in national television, and I think the public deserves answers on the record, not off it. I gave a final deadline, the 29th of July 2026, exactly 12 months after the original questions. I said plainly that if I didn't get a response by that date, I'd note that alongside the full correspondence trail wherever this report gets discussed going forward. That date is now passed with no response. Now, I'm not going to tell you what that silence means. I don't think I need to. I've shown you my working, I've showed you the data sets, I've shown you the confidence intervals, and I've shown you the questions, dated in writing, unanswered for a year. So, I want to stop hedging on this next point, because I went and found something that means I don't have to anymore. The Salon Employers Association, one of the coalition members behind this whole campaign, publishes its aims and ideas openly on its own website. And I want to read you their opening line word for word, because it tells you everything about who this campaign is actually for before you even get to the 5 specific asks. And I quote, "To campaign for salons with bricks and mortar premises, working and employing pay-as-you-earn staff and training future employees within the sector to achieve fiscal and tax parity with alternative salon business models and other high street retailers." End of quote. Excuse me. Read that again. Bricks and mortar, employing pay-as-you-earn staff. That is the membership this campaign is built around, stated plainly by them before a single tax proposal is even listed. Not chair renters, not the genuinely self-employed, not mobile stylists working from home, the employer model, full stop. Now here are the 5 asks, and I want you to listen for the pattern. Aim 1. Adopt a split rate VAT model, 10% services, and in the same breath campaign to lower the VAT threshold to around £30,000. So thereby dragging more small operators into the VAT system while simultaneously cutting the rate for the businesses already in it. Aim 2, and this is the one that stopped me on my tracks. Exempt labour-intensive salons from employers' national insurance entirely, but only, and I'm quoting their criteria here, if their payroll represents 50% of their net turnover or more. Read that carefully. That's not a general relief for the sector. That's a threshold written by them that specifically rewards the businesses running the highest payroll percentages. The exact model I was only speculating about a minute ago. Except now, it's not my speculation. It's aim number 2 on their list. Aim number 3, a reduced corporation tax rate. That's a benefit that, by definition, only reaches incorporated limited companies, not sole traders, not partnerships, not most of the small operators that this campaign claims to be speaking for. So let's total up who this actually helps. Bricks and mortar premises, pay-EY employer model, high payroll percentage by their own 50% threshold, incorporated companies. Every single one of these criteria describes a larger, established employer model salon. Not one of them describes the chair renter, the mobile stylist, the sole trader under the VAT threshold. The very business models this report spends pages warning you are driving the industry's decline. They call it levelling the playing field, but read their own aims page. What you're actually looking at is a specific defined membership, self-described in their own words as bricks and mortar pay-as-you-earn employers. Writing tax policy that rewards exactly the profile its own members already have. That's not a playing field being levelled. That's a playing field being built to the measurements of the people already standing on it. So who pays for that? Let's put real numbers on it, because I don't want to leave this abstract. I went to the same ONS data CBI Economics itself relies on. Business counts broken down by exact turnover band for this industry as of March 2025. And I added up everyone trading between £50,000 and £89,000, comfortably under today's £90,000 threshold, with no VAT to deal with at all. That's 20,710 businesses out of just over 50,000 in the sector. It's 41% of every hairdressing business in the UK sitting in exactly the band that the £30,000 threshold will pull straight into VAT registration for the first time. And here's the trap those businesses walk into, because it's not just pay more tax now, and we haven't mentioned the genuinely self-employed in that, the 210,000 self-employed that are going to be dragged in as well. But anyway, here's the trap those businesses walk into, because it's not just pay more tax now. Think about their actual options once that happens. You can't shrink back under the new £30,000 line because you're already trading at whatever their premises allow. They've got staff, they've got a lease, a cost base for where they are now. Going backwards isn't really available to them. They can't easily jump into the tier where the other benefits in this campaign actually kick in either. The payroll exemption, the split rate savings, scale with how much you spend on wages, because reaching that tier means more chairs, more floor space, more staff. It's not a tax decision, that's a building you don't have and can't necessarily get. So picture someone doing £65,000 right now. No VAT, running fine. Under this proposal, new VAT registration, new admin, new bill, with no realistic route down and no realistic route up, squeezing both sides at once by a policy sold to them as help. And there's a second order on top of that. Some of the smallest operators, the ones currently trailing well under 30,000, they may look at the shifting landscape and decide the only safe move is to grow into that squeeze middle themselves, just to get ahead of the threshold before it moves again. Which means more competition pouring in exactly the band that's already been crushed from above. That's not a side effect nobody could have predicted. It's the direct foreseeable shape of what happens when you move a threshold without asking who's currently standing either side of the new line. And here's this part I think should worry a much wider group of people than just the salon industry. VAT thresholds in this country aren't set industry by industry. There's no mechanism where HMRC says the threshold is £90,000 generally, but £30,000 if you happen to cut hair. It's one number for the whole economy. So if this campaign actually succeeded in getting the threshold specifically lowered for labour-intensive trades, there are really only two ways that it plays out. Either it becomes a genuine sector-specific carve-out, in which case, why hairdressing and not the self-employed plumber, the sole gardener, the driving instructor, the cleaner, the personal trainer, Every other one-person labour-intensive trade currently sheltered under that £90,000 line for exactly the same reasons. There's no principled tax argument for singling this industry out. Open that door and you've opened it for everyone. Or it's not sector-specific at all. It's a general cut to the threshold economy-wide, which means every self-employed tradesperson in the country and every industry gets pulled into VAT at £30,000 instead of 90. That's not a small, quiet change. That's one of the more politically sensitive tax levers there is, precisely because it touches millions of self-employed people directly. And the Treasury knows it. Either path runs into the same wall, and that's worth sitting with for just a second, because this campaign's been running for around 6 years now. 6 years of asks without headline change landing. And I don't think that's simply a messaging problem or a case of nobody listening hard enough. I think it might be that the specific ask doesn't fit how the tax system is actually built. And the people with power to change it know exactly how that would land. So I know what the counter-argument's going to be, because I've heard it made directly. This summer the government cut VAT from 20% down to 5%, temporarily, remember, on children's meals, family tickets and admission to attractions like theme parks and soft play. The Great British Summer Savings Scheme, they called it, and it runs from late June till the start of September. And the argument goes, well, there it is. Proof the government can and will make sector-specific VAT changes when it wants to. So why not for us? And I mean, seriously, it's a fair question to raise, but look closely at what that scheme actually was, and it's a much weaker precedent than it sounds. It wasn't built around an industry, it was built around a transaction, a children's meal, a family ticket, an admission charge to a specific list of attractions, a theatre, a farm park, a restaurant could all qualify or not qualify, depending purely on what was being sold, not what sector they sat in. That's completely different from asking for a permanent rate cut tied to a standard industrial classification code to an entire industry, defined by what kind of business you are. And it was also, as I said, it was temporary, 10 weeks, timed deliberately to the school summer holidays, with a hard stop on the 1st of September. Not a permanent structural change to the tax system, a short, defined, time-boxed intervention. And it was funded. Government pointed to roughly £300 million, offset specifically through reforms to how multinational companies handle their foreign branches. There was an answer to how do we pay for this before it was ever announced. So yes, government has shown it's willing to use VAT as a short, targeted, funded tool for a clear public purpose, framed around helping families through a squeeze. That's true, and it's a fair point to concede. What it hasn't shown anywhere is a willingness to create a permanent, open-ended, sector-defined reduced rate for one industry. Those are not the same ask dressed differently. They're a different order of policy entirely. And conflating the two doesn't strengthen this campaign's case. It just shows how far this campaign is reaching for a precedent that really isn't there. There's one more piece of history worth knowing, because it makes the why not us, like hospitality argument, even harder to square. Go back to 2021, and during the pandemic, the industry, Hair and Barber Council, or I prefer to call them the Hairdressing Council, because that is the official name as per the Act. They just assumed the Hair and Barber Council name on their own. The NHBF, the British Beauty Council, BABTAC, and the UK Spa Association, they ran a campaign of their own. Not for a VAT cut this time, for something more fundamental, recognition as their own distinct government sector. Before that, personal care had been grouped in, quote, with retail, hospitality or any other sector for the purposes of government policy. And the industry didn't like that. They campaigned successfully to be pulled out of that group entirely and recognised as their own thing, personal care, with its own dedicated team inside government. And they won. Keith Conifer from the Hairdressing Council called it putting the sector, quote, on an equal footing with other sectors that the government looks after. The British Beauty Council called it a major milestone. So sit with that for a second. This industry actively campaigned successfully to stop being treated as an extension of hospitality, to be seen as distinct, to get its own identity, its own government relationship, its own seat at the table. And now the headline financial argument is, hospitality got a VAT cut, so why didn't we? You can't really have it both ways. Either you're a distinct sector with your own economics, your own government relationships, standing on your own 2 feet, which is what was campaigned for and won in 2021, or you're hospitality adjacent enough that whatever tax treatment hospitality gets, you're automatically owed too. Pick one. Our industry's campaigning history already picked the first one. Here's what I actually think this comes down to. Is this sector under real pressure? Absolutely. Genuinely. And I have never said otherwise. Wages have risen faster than prices in this industry for over a decade, and that squeeze is real and it is measurable. But there's a difference between fixing that pressure for the industry and fixing it for the part of the industry that happened to fund and shape the report asking for it. And a real specific problem doesn't need an invented crisis stapled on top of it. It doesn't need a data set that's been quietly narrowed to guarantee the answer you wanted. It doesn't need a survey figure with a margin of error bigger than the decline it's supposedly proven. The actual comprehensive government data, the stuff that counts every registered business, not just the convenience slice, shows a sector that's basically flat. Not collapsing, not thriving. Under pressure, yes, but standing. And here's the part I think that gets missed in all of this, and it is so important. An industry doesn't get unlimited chances to walk into Parliament and ask for help. You get a hearing, you spend the credibility, and then you're back at the mercy of whatever the next budget cycle does to wages and costs. A flat rate VAT cut doesn't fix that underlying pressure permanently. Inflation and rising labour costs will quietly eat the gain over 18 to 24 months, the same way that they created the pressure in the first place. Except by then, this sector will have already spent its one shot on a case built by numbers that don't hold up. That's not just a credibility for one problem for one report. That's a cost the whole industry pays long after this argument is forgotten. And spare a thought while you're weighing all of this up. For the salon doing £65,000 a year, trading quietly, no VAT, getting on with it. They didn't ask for any of this. They're not in the room when these aims get written. But if this campaign gets what it's asking for, they're the ones who wake up with a new tax bill and nowhere to go. Not down, not up. That's not collateral damage nobody could have foreseen. It's right there in the numbers, if anyone had bothered to add them up first. As usual, full sourcing, data sets, FOI references, every email will be uploaded to the data.salonlogicpro.co.uk website, because that's really the only point I'm making today. Don't take my word for it, and don't take theirs. Go and read the footnotes. Thanks for listening.